But the goal of these office hours is really to be the first 15 to 20 minutes, have a good discussion from our product specialist, which is going to be Ben Ennis, as well as Namita, talking with you about the topic today is resource prioritization. And they're going to cover the topic so that then we can have a good conversation for the remaining 40 minutes around any use cases, any questions that you guys as customers may have on the call. I will be recording this, obviously, and share it with any of you that are on this call. I do not share it outside of anyone who did not attend this session. But for you as customers, anyone who wasn't able to make it on your book of business or your participants, I can send it to them as well. So without further ado, definitely, Ben, go ahead and take it away. The floor is all yours.
Great, thank you. So, hey everybody. So a little bit different this week. Scott was out in India, so he's on his way back home now. So I'm taking over for this week. So new face, a little bit new voice on the phone here. So today's topic is resource prioritization. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go do a little bit of kind of put us all on the same, we're all playing on the same field here. So I'm going to go over a little bit about the resource management process and how this kind of plays into prioritizing resources. And I've got a few use cases at the end that we're going to go through and we're going to demonstrate in the platform. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here to talk about our process out of the box. So first thing here is when we're building resource plans in ServiceNow, we're typically doing it against a demand or a project. Typically in the demand, you're asking a project manager or somebody to do some resourcing or some kind of take the first swing at what kind of roles or what kind of groups you're going to need on a given project and how many hours. And then the next piece of that would be to send that over to a resource manager or a functional manager to be able to do that analysis part. And this is going to be kind of the part that we're going to dig into a little bit today is how, as a functional manager, do I prioritize my resources as far as what work is in my queue, when work gets moved around, how do I know if I have more capacity, those types of things. So what we're going to be looking at that's primarily in kind of the analyze phase. This request and negotiate phase also plays a bit of a role here to align resources as far as their availability goes. You know, not every project, we can't do every project. So how do we decide which ones to do and which ones not to do? And then ultimately being able to confirm and allocate those resources into some sort of a hard booked fashion where we're now allocating our time to a specific set of work. And then of course, if that project or anything does have any changes to it where we say maybe push the dates back on a certain phase, how do we free up those resources and then allocate them to something else in the meantime? So from a kind of a technical perspective here, there's a certain number of states that the resource plan records are transitioning between. The planning state is just that. It's the state that when, say, a requester requests a resource that then is put into the planning state. And at that point, they can make changes to that record, or they can go ask other folks if they have any input as far as the hours and the types of resources that are needed. And when they submit that plan, it's going to move into the requested state. And that's the state where the resource manager at that point is going to take a look at it, as you can see here. And when they take a look at it, they're going to do that kind of negotiation. They're going to use a number of different workbenches, such as the capacity view or the allocation workbench, which we'll look at today. And then they're either going to approve that request and allocate it, or, well, confirm it, and then allocate it. Difference being confirmed being a soft booking, typically a case where we don't have necessarily a named resource defined yet, but we have committed to the work, and allocated being ultimately allocated a physical person to that work from my group. And then once we're done, the work is completed and we close the plan. We do also have some situations where when we say move a project schedule and we need to free up a resource, we'll talk about how when we move that schedule and we move the date, the start date of that resource plan, what actually happens is we actually end up canceling the resource plan. And then actually the system will automatically create a new one with the new dates and all the allocations, and it does move it back into that requested state. And we'll see that today in this workflow in our example when a project changes, we have a project change. I wanted to throw the slide in here, just not that we're going to talk about availability a lot today. We're going to look at it on some of the charts and some of the workbenches that we're going to be looking at. So just wanted to go over briefly about how the availability is calculated. So
can I ask one quick question about what you had just stated earlier? And that is when you do the cancel and the reallocation, do the actual hours for that resource plan move forward, or how does that work?
No, so they stay within that resource plan. So you'll actually still, it'll still show as that the resource had consumed, if they had billed anything, for instance. If they had billed anything, or when I say billed, I mean booked any time cards against that resource plan. And let's say we had worked for 2 months and then we realized we needed to move that phase out 6 months due to some blocker. That person to maybe put in 20 hours or something like that on that resource plan. What happens is when we move that date, it's going to go from this allocated state, which is where they were booking their hours against, and then it's going to cancel that plan. And what will happen is you'll still have the actuals against this resource plan, and it still exists. It's just in the canceled state. So you can still see that someone had actually booked time against a plan, against a project, but it's no longer an active resource plan. There's going to be a new one that's created that they'll then be booking against. They actually won't even be able to book against the canceled one anymore in their time cards.
Yeah, that sort of, it just interferes a little bit with a resource manager who's trying to figure out for their group how many hours certain projects take. So they'll just have to add, I guess. But you know,
well, so it'll still retain the planned hours, right? So
right.
when I change,
they like the planned hours and the actual hours right next to each other.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's true. So you wouldn't necessarily see on the canceled plan any hours that were booked against that in that time frame. You're only going to be seeing that time frame going forward. So let's say I move my project 6 months out. I'll have a resource plan in there now for that 6 months out, but I won't have any actuals against it until I start actually booking against it. So yes, you're right. You wouldn't necessarily see it on that plan itself. However, it will reflect in the workbenches when you're trying to look at, say group capacity or individual's capacity, what the planned resource plans are in there versus their allocation or what their availability is. If we were going to talk about here, how that's calculated. So does that kind of make sense? Yeah.
No,
so,
I'm sad a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, it is what it is for right now. I can tell you this though, that in the next few releases, I don't know if it's Orlando or Paris. I do know that Namita, maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
I can. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Stacy, we have plans to bring in the actuals also, so that today when you go to the resource allocation workbench, and I'm talking it in generic way, not just for the canceled ones, you don't see the actuals. And this is a demand from most of our end users, resource managers. They would like to see the actuals also. So we are bringing in the actuals so that you can see that just with the planned.
And I do see that already in, we're in New York. I was in Orlando. So we see in the allocation workbench the actual hours that are tied to that resource plan. The problem is, I think with the newness of this, and we're adding lots of resource plans, there was some actual hours that were before in those specific groups, and those aren't shining through yet.
Maybe from the upgrade point of view, if you're saying we can look at it, we can look into it later. But yeah, what I'm saying is that going forward in Orlando, from the resource allocation workbench, you will get the actuals in the resource finder, so that you don't have to go further in the reports to just see what is actuals against the planned and the allocated.
Okay, yeah, well, we can look more into that. That's great.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so I'm going to quickly go over how availability is calculated here, just so we know when we're looking at our charts or our allocation workbench. So in our view here, capacity basically is any sort of time that I've given as far as vacation or sick time is taken off, or admin time, added to any operational work. So if I had any operational resource plans in there in which I was doing incidents or problems, and then of course the planned work, adding the planned work that I've got for my projects and Scrum related work. And all those added together, minus capacity, is the availability. And the capacity is actually another way. The way that is calculated is all based on the resource schedules. So whether we're in 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that can be defined at the user level and the group level as far as what their schedules look like and how that capacity is fully calculated. Okay, so we're gonna go over a number of different use cases, but before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about, we were actually kind of hinting on this a little bit earlier in the call. Someone had mentioned that they use skills as kind of another layer to help them pick resources. And that's really all about defining your strategy for allocating resources or organizing resources, I should say. And there's a number of different ways we can do that in ServiceNow. I just wanted to make you aware of it. There's the individual user route, which is where you're assigning an individual user to a resource plan. A lot of our customers that are first starting out with resource management tend to select this simply because the groups that are in the system don't always line up to a functional manager or somewhere where they can route the work or route those resource plans. So they're requesting based on individual users. Usually it's just, at this point, you're not getting a really great picture of an entire group of people, but you are at least getting that capacity and availability management by putting the hours that each individual user is contributing to a project or a piece of work. The second one, which is one that's probably the most commonly used strategy, is the resource groups. So someone is physically configuring groups in ServiceNow that have a manager, and that manager manages the allocations that group has, whether that is project work or operational work or whatever. So that's strategy number 2. And then strategy number 3 we've put in here is a specialized group. So in this case, it may not be a functional manager that it's rolling up to, but some group of resources such as DBAs or UX designers. They may exist on multiple teams, but when we're requesting resources, we want to be able to go to one group to be able to kind of pick them all. And that's the case where you would make a specialized group for that. Not something you're going to do for every single group in your organization, but I'm sure you probably have a number of groups that have a lot of shared resources that operate across multiple teams, multiple products. If you have that case, it might be a good idea to create some specialized groups to be able to request them. And then, of course, the final one here is role-based. This one's a little bit more tricky for our customers to get to, simply because there's not really a centralized place where a role exists. I have seen some customers try to import things off of maybe like Workday or through the HR system to try and be able to line up roles and rates with a group or a set of users. Tends to be a little bit more tricky than just going the group route. Okay. So we're going to dive in now and take a look at some of this. So the three use cases here that I'm going to go over that look like are kind of the stuff that you guys are asking about was what is the best way to add or remove resources from resource plans? So we'll look at the allocation workbench and show you how to add, remove resources from either as granular as, say, maybe a given month. I want to swap out a resource, maybe because somebody's on vacation or something like that, or I just want to swap out a resource entirely for the rest of a project. And I'll show you how to do that through the allocation workbench as well. So resource impacts on project shifts. So this is what I was referring to earlier. Let's say that project moves out 6 months, and so we've got 3 months in, and now we've got a blocker that's moving that project out 6 months. What do I do with those resource plans that I've already allocated on that project? And then ultimately, when I do move those resource plans off of that project, how do I determine which projects I can then move them to in the meantime to be able to do some work? So now that I've got some freed up capacity in my group. So we'll show you how to do that as well through the allocation workbench. So I'm going to dive around. Does anybody have any questions about anything we went over just now? No? Okay. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to show you is the portfolio workbench, and I'm sure you've all seen this view before, but I just wanted to show you that as far as prioritization, we talked about resource prioritization, and I think we also have to, in that conversation, we also have to talk about work prioritization. The way that most of our customers decide where to put their resources is all based off of the work that's in their queue. So in this case, we're looking at the IT transformation portfolio. And I've given this $15 million target here, already configured this. And I'm going to go in and take a look at my timeline view here in my portfolio workbench, just to give you an idea of, right now, this is probably the closest we have to doing sort of that what if scenario. You know, if I pick this project versus this project, how does it affect my resources? But I do understand that on our roadmap, we are looking at doing some scenario-based planning stuff. Namita, can you talk a little bit about that? Do you know much about that?
That's right, Ben. That's right. Right. So we are moving towards the scenario-based planning, and this is again planned for Paris, not yet confirmed. Yeah. So we don't have much, things to share about that, Ben, at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah. So just kind of know that it's potentially coming down the road, where we're going to be able to do the scenario type. Take a snapshot of this and pit it against another one. To see which set of projects you might want to do, versus just having the static workbench like it is right now, where I'm basically looking at checking, unchecking these, and refreshing my views. And it's not really a scenario. You're just more of kind of playing around configuring here. The one other thing to note too, one of the other asks was, how do I know what projects are conflicting? So in this example here, if I'm looking in Q2 here at FY20, I can see if I did end up doing everything that was requested of me, I would go over my capacity line a little bit here. If I wanted to dig into what exactly the work was that's in Q2 here, I can look at what I'm allocated to just simply by clicking this bar. This will actually take me to a list of all the projects that I would be doing in my portfolio. So these are all the projects in my portfolio that have resources slotted for Q2 of 2020. So if I want to look at that, I don't necessarily know timeline-wise what's conflicting, but I do know that this is all contained within Q2 of 2020. So if I was interested, but this is more of a higher level view. We'll get into the more granular level view on the allocation workbench here to show you these kind of views in a more tactical way, such as looking in the context of a group. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into our allocation workbench.
Hey, Ben, what version is this you're showing?
I'm showing a New York version of ServiceNow. All right.
We just got New York today, so that's awesome.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Let's see. I'll pull up my slide deck here. All right. So okay. So the first use case here was the best way to add or remove resources from resource plans to get a better picture of the current and future capacity. So let's take a look here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on a group here. So I'm going to look at my analyst group. And so if I'm looking at this allocation workbench, so I'm kind of playing the role now of a resource manager. And what I want to do here is I want to look through all of my projects, and I want to be able to add, remove resources. Let's say I have somebody going on vacation, or maybe I'm making a staff change or something like that. And I need to take one of my plans or multiple of my plans and add a different user to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these resource plans here under a preferably something that's maybe allocated. So let's see if I can find anything that's allocated already. No, don't have anything allocated. So let me allocate something here really quick. So we're going to say that this develop new employee portal project has one FTE of my group allocated to it. But what's going to happen is, let's say, for instance, Tony's moving groups. So I need to add another user onto here. So how do I do that? How do I kind of swap and replace? And Namita, there is a resource swap? Is that coming at some point in the future as well?
Thank you so much, Ben. Yes. So I wanted to share this with this group. In Paris, we have been doing certain features, and one of them is for the resource manager to replace the user. So on the very right hand side where you see these three dots, you just will get a new option which will say replace user. And as a result of which you can replace this user who is Tony for a certain time periods, say for 1 month, 2 months, with another user of the same group. It's very easy feature and you don't have to do another, allocation, new plan, nothing like that. So yeah, so thanks Tony, thanks Ben for asking that question.
Yeah, it's nice to let people know what's coming. So in order to do this—
Hi, I'm sorry, this is Mandy. I have a question with Wake Forest. So you said that you could switch a user within the same group. However, sometimes we have team members who are switching groups. So if I have a team member who is switching into a new group, would I be able to use the same functionality and define that they're going to take over for this other user on month 3 of the project?
Right. So I can answer that, Ben. So basically, I see that as a different step, because when the users are switching the groups, you have to put them in a different group, right? And once you transfer the user in the second group, after that, you can assign the user from that group, because unless and until that user belongs to that group, you cannot assign him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, so in order to— the way to do this today without that functionality that's coming in our roadmap is you need to do one of a couple of things. Either you could create an entirely new plan for your other resource, and then you could cancel this one. So if the scenario was simply that Tony was moving to another group or was leaving the company or something to that effect, what you would do is create an entirely new resource plan for your other resource and then cancel this one. That would free Tony's time back up out of your capacity, and then you would allocate another user to it. So the way to do that would be to create a new plan. So I'm going to go into the project here. It's typically something that is done in conjunction with the project manager if you have a resource conflict of some sort. Go on to the project record, and I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to create a new plan. It'll be the same plan, analysts group. We'll throw in the hours here. And of course, I would add my dates in. And just for our demo purposes, I'm just throwing an extra plan in here. And so, actually, this was 1 FTE, wasn't it? Okay, so now I can go ahead here and sorry. Mouse is acting up. Go ahead here and I can select another user. So for instance, let's say I want to select Troy. Troy's going to take over for Tony here. So what I'm going to do is move him to— So the other thing I wanted to call out here was that, so when I'm looking to add another user, so this is actually one of our other use cases before I actually confirm and allocate this. What I wanted to do was actually look and see what else he's working on. So how do I know that Troy isn't working on another project that may actually take some additional time? So what I can do is I can actually go right into Troy and pull down his menu here, and I can actually see the other work that he's allocated. And what I'm going to do now is take Troy and I'm going to move him into a new plan. So, oops. Okay. So what I've done here is I've confirmed Troy on my new plan. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and allocate him. And then the next step is going to be to go ahead and close Tony's plan. So this is the plan where Tony was allocated full time, and I'm going to go ahead and go into this plan, and I'm going to cancel it. And so that would be the way to do it today in the system. Unfortunately, that's like a manual process today, as when you need to swap resources, you need to go and physically, give it a different date range, give it a different set of hours and a resource, and then cancel the one that you had in place. And what that's going to do is it's going to free up your FTE here from that one user that's going to maybe be leaving the group or leaving the company, and then it's granting the hours here to another resource. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to take a look at here is, I should pull my slide deck back out here. So the next use case I'm going to run through is resource impacts on projects or shifts in priorities, as well as kind of the best way to determine which projects are which projects you should look at from a priority perspective on your various resources. So we're going to do that through the we call it the capacity planning workbench. So this is one of our other views here. And so this one's going to give us an idea of how much capacity does my group have and what are they working on. So I'm already kind of filtered here on my analyst group, as you can see. So right now I'm just looking at all of the requested stuff. So I'm going to select all of my plans that are in the requested state. And it's going to pull up a graph here. And I think we've talked about this view before in the past in some of our past sessions. All right. Okay, so I've got a number of different plans here. I've selected everything. So if I do everything, I'm looking here mainly in 2020. Most of my plans are here. And I can see that I've got a number of things that are requested. Everything, if I were to do everything, it would be well over my capacity here. And actually, one thing to keep in mind here, right now I'm looking at in the context of FTE. I could actually move this to hours if I wanted to, depending on how you're actually looking at your resources. And so if I wanted to say, look at, let's see, say March of 2020, and I wanted to see if I could do any extra projects. So typically what would happen is you would be allocated either up to your capacity or really close to it. And when a project was moved, either by a project manager, for whatever reason, schedule changed, what would have to happen as part of that moving process is to go in and reschedule the resource plans. So kind of similar to like what we just did, I went back in and instead of deleting a resource plan and re-adding like we did to replace a resource, what we'd be doing is just moving the dates on a resource plan. And what would happen there is it would cancel that resource plan like I mentioned, it would create a new one for the new date range. And this graph here would update with the correct values. So then you would then see that you'd probably have a little gap here. You'd probably either have some more requested work that you could do because you're not quite at your capacity line yet. And if you wanted to look at what that work was, you could go right ahead and click on this bar here. And I can see these are all the projects that you have that have requested resources from your group, or the analyst group in this case. And I can go and take a look at which ones I might want to actually consider doing. And this can all be done in a couple of different ways as far as the projects go. So if I was curious to see, what out of all these projects, which ones are the highest priority, I would have to go take a look at each of the ones, or maybe I would know. That's why I kind of talked about the portfolio workbench in the beginning, because ultimately the portfolio workbench is where the prioritization piece happens on all of these. So you're gonna have to have some kind of idea of which projects we're gonna take priority in the portfolio or in the set of projects that your group is working on. Once I get there and I find the project that I wanna allocate to, so I think I might be able to actually get there right from here. So I've got a lot of extra time here in my plan. So if I wanted to do, say, everything within that would kind of fill up my gap here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just deselecting ones so that I can get back to my capacity line here. All right, that looks about right. Okay. Normally I'd want a little bit more. Okay, here we go. Kind of close. So we're getting really close up to our capacity line here. So now what I can do, if I want to go and straight away confirm and allocate everything in here that I've selected in this left-hand side, that's kind of below my capacity line. Since I've had a change, I'm going to go and I can confirm and allocate right here, or I could just confirm and then select my resources later. But I'm going to go ahead and confirm and allocate. And what this is going to do, it's going to take the resource plans that are on those projects that are kind of sitting in my hopper, because I had a change in schedule. I'm going to go ahead and allocate or confirm and allocate to these projects now, since my other project was moved out later and I have some capacity freed up, which I can tell from this view. And this takes a minute here to confirm this. Yes, bear with me 1 second while this loads. Okay, great. So now you can see that all of those were confirmed and allocated. They disappeared off of my left-hand side here. So now these are the only plans I have left in my queue. So if I go back and look, you can see if I were to do these, it would put me way over capacity, right? And we knew that earlier, and that's why we selected the ones we did. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about what we just looked at? Okay, so I'm going to open it up now for any discussion, anything about how you guys are doing this, any use cases you guys have, or maybe how to kind of accommodate certain processes that you're doing within your resource management process.
Ben, I have a question. Curious how other people handle PTO. I noticed on the availability screen you referenced PTO and admin as two separate things. We create resource plans for admin and all the other categories, but we do not for PTO. We use my calendar for folks to reflect their PTO there. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious about the general thoughts about that and how others are kind of allocating for PTO.
Yeah.
This is Nicole from New Hanover. We do the same thing that you do as well. We have them anytime they're out of the office, education, conferences, etc., PTO. We also have them put it on their My Calendar, but a challenge is remembering for them to go in and remember to do that, because we want to make sure it's deducting from their availability, especially if they're going to be out for 40 hours that week. So sometimes it does look like they have capacity when they really do not. So it's kind of a challenge for us.
At Cone Health, we've kind of taken it just at a higher level, and a certain percentage of our operational hours are the percentage of time that groups are out. So it's kind of allocated already in the operational hours, along with, I guess it's what, 10% of the team's hours. And then, so that's how we do it. A little simpler.
So for those that aren't familiar, this is what the My Calendar looks like. And when you book things on there, like I was just showing, that'll actually eat your capacity there, right? So it'll show you as unavailable. So if I had, say an offsite meeting or something on today, I could go ahead and book this for all day, and it would take my 8 hours and make them not available for this Friday. So nobody could book me on a project or anything like that. Same thing for vacation and that kind of stuff. Okay.
Are there other teams using that resource plan regularly, like with their resource managers?
When you say resource plan, are you talking about like blocking for admin time, that kind of stuff?
No, I'm sorry. I meant just the whole resource allocation workbench. Oh. We have 18 managers here, and I'm slowly trying to integrate it. It is adding value is a little confusing for them, because part of their bigger issue is the priorities when they share their resources with other teams, right? So you need the ambulatory team and the Willow team and the
right. And that's kind of why I showed you portfolio workbench, because that's really where the prioritization, the management teams are kind of declaring, all right, this project is high priority. You can see actually in the allocation workbench here, you've got the priority level here. It's not, going to be like a unique value, right? It's either low, medium, high kind of thing. But it's a good way to kind of a little tell here for saying, okay, well, what priority is this actually? You know, you could also go look at the score here too. If this was something that you were using in the demand management piece, you could look and say, okay, well, maybe if the score is particularly high, I would allocate my resources to this over something else when I get some time freed up. That's one way to do it. Or you could do it based on just simply a higher level value of low, medium, high to give yourself, you know, a way to filter this, right? So I could filter this or sort this by low, medium, high, right?
And this is Nicole from New Hanover. I mean, I know personally, I know I utilize when I meet with my team one-on-one. I have one-on-one appointments with them every other week, and we go through resource reports, and I pull up the allocation detail report by the individual. Sometimes I have to pull it up by the team if I need to quickly assess who's got the most capacity to take on a project right then. But kind of going back to the prioritization of the project, so one thing hopefully, you know, ServiceNow is continuing to work on is more of that project roadmap. It would be great if we could take all those project requests or demands, if you will, kind of roadmap that out. Because one thing we're working on right now is revising our project intake form. We've had it in place for a while, but we are revising that. And one of the updates we will be making are we have specific strategic initiatives with specific tactics that we know are ones that our executive team are saying, yes, move the needle, this is what we need to do. Sometimes our customers do come in. We actually have a meeting every week. Customers come to us and say, this is a strategic priority, but we may or may not know that. So it would be nice if they selected that initiative in the whatever, that project intake form, and then it automatically kind of marked it. And I know that there is a drop down currently, strategic or operational, that we have, but it kind of stars that on a roadmap. So we have like a one-stop glance and go board, if you will, to identify those so we can quickly prioritize those over others. I know that was a mouthful, but that's just kind of something that I would love to be able to see so we can know what resources we need to pull off of other projects and shift around.
Yeah, but like I always thought, and I've never seen a customer do this, but in theory it could be done. You know, if you had a really good way to prioritize all that work, you know, if you had a unique scoring mechanism to where you could say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like definitively. You could drive some automation there. If you were confident in that scoring process and that the resources that you've allocated to those absolutely need to be doing this first, this second, this third, you might even be able to say, you know, allocate all the resources to things up to the capacity line for a given group based on the priority of that work. So if out of demand management comes a project that's got a really high score, high value, I would auto allocate my resources in there to that instead of having to kind of go through all the stuff that's in your backlog, which could be quite a bit of stuff, you know. As you're sorting through a lot of resource plans, a lot of projects, or a lot of demands. Some, especially if you don't have an idea of what the priority of those are, it's going to be awfully difficult to allocate your resources without knowing exactly what work we should be doing. So, and also removing resources off of projects. So if you have a higher priority project, what if that project becomes escalated or something happens? Where do I remove resources from? So that also comes down to the prioritization score here on the project. This is really a way that you're going to be able to like quantify, you know, how what the priority of this work should be.
This is Mary Myers from Biden, and I wanted to go back to that. You had that on the previous screen where you showed how somebody could block off their time on their calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to add a comment there that you see how, in this case, the person who's doing it put it in for the whole 24-hour period. This will play out in some of the other screens that actually will, ServiceNow will calculate it as a 24 hours of their time. So we have been very careful to communicate with our resources that as they put in their PTO, for example, they need to put in just the 8 hours. is very,
Oh,
it's really
right.
critical
Yep.
to our tools on the back end.
Very good point. Yep, that is 100% correct. Yep, if you were to do that for like what I did here, yeah, that would absolutely be, that would show us 24 hours of time that's unavailable, even though like my project schedule or my working schedule is only an 8-hour workday. This is actually going to go in, this would almost look like I'm unavailable for 3 days, but I'm not, you know? So yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Hey, this is Robert from Vidant. I just wanted to bring up something real quick that we experienced when we upgraded to New York. It's related to the time card daily table, which I'm absolutely like ecstatic about. I love the idea of that table, so we're very excited to work with it. But we noticed that when we went live with it, some of the data wasn't populating correctly. Like if I had a time card that had hours Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the time card daily table would put the hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we opened a case for that for ServiceNow, and they actually looked into it, and it was a problem. They actually provided us a fix for it too, but I just want to kind of call that out because we caught it pretty early on, so luckily we didn't have too many records created on that table, you know, that we would have to go back and either delete or fix. So I just kind of wanted to call that out.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that one is gonna be a patch in Orlando, I think. I've seen that issue a few times before. And yeah, I think it's a PRB on our side. So I don't know if they provide you a workaround for now, but I think we're gonna be. The last time I looked at that PRB, I want to say it was slotted to create a fix for that. It was either gonna be a hot fix or it was gonna be in the Orlando release. That was gonna be.
Yeah, I think it's Orlando. I'm looking at the ticket here, and they said they weren't able to reproduce it in Orlando. So I guess it's been fixed there, but they did at least provide us a workaround for that, so we can use it for the time being.
Sounds like a schedule related thing. I think the way that we look at the schedule on the back ends, as far as like the date ranges go, I think that's what the issue was. Something in there. That's what it looked like, because that's why it was giving you the wrong days. That's from what the last.
Still, like I said, very happy about it. Love the idea of it. It's gonna be pretty big for us going forward, I think.
Yeah, it's a great table for reporting off of as well. I mean, that's why we built it. You know.
Great. Any other questions or comments related to the topic that we had? Any forward-thinking questions related to prioritizing and planning resources here? Any other areas you guys want to see a little bit more in depth while we have Ben and Amita on the line? Don't be shy.
This is Glenn. I had a question about the slide where Ben showed the allocation workbench, and the example was analysts, and I think it was Tony was added to added under the group. And so I think that what technically happened was that there was not a user resource plan created for Tony, but rather Tony would show under the resource allocations under the group plan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that's something that we are kind of testing and we think we're going to move towards, whereas now we sort of require user plans across the board. So the question is, in that example where Tony was on the group plan, when Tony logs time to that task, is his time noted on the group plan, or is it noted related to his individual allocation?
It's both. So when he books time, it does show like, so if I were to go, let's see if I can find any better. Okay, let's see if I can find one here. Some actuals. Oh, no, oops, not that one. All right, so if I can find any actuals here. All right, so you would see here. So you see like, in this case, I've got this enterprise integration bus project. and I've got a number of my resources on here. It's been allocated. So if I had somebody book, like say Tony or Scott or somebody booked any time against this in the month of January, it would show here next to their allocation on this plan for the analysts. It would show it here. It would also roll up to the to this as well. So if I were to minimize this, I would see the actuals here as well. So it does aggregate everything. So if I had multiple people assigned to a resource plan for a group, let's say I'm splitting the time between two resources, as they book their time, it would roll up here to the top level, as well as show it against their individual allocation for that month.
Okay. So from a reporting perspective, that time would be on the resource allocation for Tony?
That's correct. Yep. We would call it the resource allocation breakdown record. And it's done, those are created by month, I believe. So they're fiscal period, I should say. Not necessarily month, but fiscal period. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything not necessarily related directly to this topic, but something about resource management or about the project management process, intake, in regards to, how do we plan resources? Actually, I'm kind of curious to the crowd here. As far as resource planning goes, when you first start initiating in the demand phase, how do you guys decide what resource plans to put on a demand as kind of like the first swing at what the labor is going to be for a given piece of work? How do you guys go about doing that?
This is Nicole from New Hanover. We actually we've had for quite some time. Obviously, we have our project intake form, so we ask our customers to submit a project request form that route to my team and myself, and we get those and invite a customer to a standing Monday, we call it a project request review meeting, if you will. And we take about 3 guests per Monday. It's held every Monday at 10 o'clock. And we actually have representation from every one of our IT teams. And we've kind of grown that to include our informatics teams. We have folks from HIM, physician group, biomed. And then the customer comes in to that Monday meeting, and they know they've got about 15 to 20 minutes per guest, and they give a high-level scope. Our teams can get a high-level understanding of the request, and then we do a round robin to each team, and we kind of document in the demand, in the work notes, what teams are needed. And then from there, I will go out and work back with the management team kind of on the prioritization of this request and who's going to lead it.
So almost like a cab kind of, right? Almost like a kind of a board like meeting with like stakeholders from every area, and you just kind of crowdsource it that way every Monday. That's how you guys do that then, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we do, like we do invite the customer, and so pretty much it's when we do have an opening. So like right now we've got the next 3 Mondays booked. So if a new one comes in today, now granted, if they say this is regulatory, patient safety, et cetera, then we do go in and we prioritize to fit them into an earlier Monday. But it was more because our staff, a couple of years ago, it was pretty much the PM was going out there and trying their best to pinpoint what resources are needed with limited information. But now all of our teams can sit in and listen real time to the customer's requests. And we have, like I said, a representation from each of those teams. And so sometimes it might be a TBD. We don't know how many hours. And so in that case, we take it offline and we have kind of a mini scoping meeting with the customer to include those resources. And then from there, we have a better idea. And then we can start putting in resource plans once we've appointed a lead.
Wow. Okay, cool. Wow, that seems like a pretty good process. If there's anything that like ServiceNow and our product could help facilitate that for you better or work better for you, what do you think that would be? Something we could do to help that process for you along.
So it goes back to my earlier comment for us. We we do struggle with prioritization of our resources. So our interface and Citrix and network resources are obviously in very high demand. And so it truly is us knowing what is on the roadmap. So if we have 90 active projects going on and we have another 80 plus in the queue as a demand, it's trying to have a visual, because right now I truly am making homemade roadmaps of all of those active projects and demands in an Excel spreadsheet. And so quarterly, I meet with our management team and we go over that roadmap, but now we're trying to start back up recoin a technology governance meeting with some of our VPs. And so the goal is to actually show a roadmap there. So really, I mean, having a real-time roadmap that we're not having to manipulate and do real-time, prioritization based on allocation or capacity of our resources.
Okay. So the kind of component you're missing from here is like, we've got all the allocation data and the physical project information, but you're kind of missing that roadmap higher level piece to get better understanding of where all these physical numbers and resources and capacity needs to go towards.
Right. So if we were to really resource load up and kind of soft book, if you will, all of our demands, we don't have a good way individually. I mean, you're basically having to go to each manager and understand or pull their resource reports. But it would be great to be able to see specifically for demands. We soft book those resources from resources we know will need to be on that project. And then from there, kind of have a visual, a roadmap. It's not even a roadmap, just a visual of all of that to say, yeah, this is where you're going to have gaps based on anticipated start and end time of that request.
Exactly. Okay. So it's more of like, and it could even be like skill related, like where, if you've got like, say, network engineers, right? There's only so many network engineers that you have, right? So, that group, it might not necessarily be a group. So that's why I went over earlier in the call about kind of how to structure those groups. So some of them might be a specialized group. So in that case, your high demand resources like network group and Citrix group might be a specialized group, right? So it's not necessarily aligning to a functional manager, but it is a big pool of people that you kind of want to understand their capacity.
Correct.
So is that what you've done? Have you created like big group for network engineers or network teams?
We do, right. So we do have it, grouped accordingly. And sometimes if we don't know, I mean, we only would request an individual if that manager has previously said, hey, Nicole is going to be your resource. Would we request that individual? But for the most part, we're requesting an individual specific. Well, not a specific, we just need an individual from that group. And then based on capacity, that's when the manager would say, yay or nay, I have that. But it's also, if you reject a resource, having that kind of real-time feedback, maybe in an email that tells the PM, because right now we're having to manually go in and look at those resource plans to say who's been allocated, who's been, rejected. So it's kind of a lot of manual process right there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And we only got a couple of minutes left here. And on that road mapping piece, we do have something coming on our roadmap for doing like technology road mapping or project road mapping. Amita, do you know more about that?
Sorry, say again, Ben?
The road mapping piece, is that Paris for the roadmap stuff, or is that later than that?
Right. Again, it is planned, Ben, but not essentially.
We don't have it in a release yet. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So by the way, I have a question, and again, this is follow up with what Ben has said. So just trying to check your views here, who are on the call. Today, when you go to the resource finder, and if you just show that view, Ben, you see something like availability, capacity, allocated percentage utilization for every group. But is it a good idea to show here just at the group level, not at the users level, but at the group level, what is planned and requested? So that when you are coming here for the analyst group, you also see what is overall planned and requested. And then based on that, you can do some actions for this particular project or a demand.
Yeah. So,
Just trying to understand. Yeah.
yeah. So like if we were kind of looking at that process that we were just talking about,
Yeah.
that would probably aid a little bit more in that initial discussion of what resources go where, especially if you had a single view where you could look at it. But I think Namita, the one challenge also is that's assuming that like this group is the only set of resources that you're planning for, and in a lot of other cases it sounds like you've got a lot of shared resources.
Oh yeah.
And in that case
We're going to drop. This is Vita.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you guys for attending.
Thank you.
So much, Vita. Take care.
Yeah. Sorry, we're going a little bit over here. But
Sure, I'm okay. I got my answer, Ben. Thank you.
okay. All right.
Thanks.
Well, definitely everyone, thank you guys so much for a very interactive office hour. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Navita. Thank you, customers, for showing up and obviously participating. We have another office hour coming up on the 13th, all about ITBM out-of-the-box reports. And then we have one on the 31st, I believe, about prioritization of resources. So I look forward to seeing you all there. I will send out a recording to those who requested of this office hour. Thank you so much, and have a great Friday and weekend, all.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.